Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. We've had some really hot weather over the last few weeks, which is lovely, but quite tough on plants, particularly if they're in a container. So they do need watering much more often than normal, in fact every day when it's as hot as this. And if you can, the best time to water your containers is early in the morning, before the sun warms up. But if you can't get it done early in the morning, don't do it during the middle of the day, but wait till the evening. Basically when it's cool. The plants will then take the moisture and then they can lose it during the day without suffering any problems. And the rule of watering is always the same. Soak, don't sprinkle. Water directly to the roots of the soil or the compost and go on until the water is running out of the bottom of the container. And then the roots can get down deep and find that moisture. And finally, just because you're watering every day, you don't need to feed any more than normal. And these plants will grow strong and healthy even if it's burning hot. On today's programme, Sue Kent searches out inspiration for her own garden at the glorious Aberglasney Gardens in Wales.
Although everything here is on a really big scale, I'm hoping to find something here that I can use and scale down in my garden.
We visit a gardener in Kent who values the colours and textures of her foliage above any flower.
When people walk past, they call it the jungle because no other garden in the road is like this one.
And I shall be both harvesting and planting in my vegetable garden. This is the mound. Now the mound has been evolving as a garden area for the last 10 years, literally 10 years. And we've never quite got it right, but I do think we're getting there. Because we've put up this summer house. The idea is to have somewhere that we can come to, we can open the doors wide and get some shade if it's very hot like today. And because we've finished the outside of the building, it means that I can start planting. And the planting scheme will repeat what we already have, which are soft yellows, blues, touches of white, and above all, fragrance. And I want the building to rise up surrounded by lovely fragrant flowers all around it. You might remember that at the beginning of this year, I dug up the wisteria. Now, wisterias do not like being cut back and dug up and moved, and I thought that it was 50-50 at best. But here we are. It's grown back. I think it's going to be fine and can be replanted. Now, I'm not going to plant this today because it's too hot and I think the stresses and strains would be a step too far. But there are plants that I can put in. Now, this is west facing, it's sunny, it's warm and it's sheltered. So I have got the chance to have plants that may be a little bit more tender than in a more exposed position. Now, this is a rose that I haven't grown before. It's got this very pale lemon colour, almost ivory. It's very fragrant and it's tough. It's called the country parson and it will flower from late spring right through the summer. Now I'm going to put this near the window so that the fragrance will rise up. That can go there. Now this is a plant I've never grown before. It's Coronella and it's an evergreen with little leguminous flowers, very fragrant. It will flower in late winter, early spring, if the weather is kind, and go on for a month or 6 weeks, and then will flower again in late summer. And the idea is to train it up just around the window. It's not completely hardy, but I'm hoping that on this spot, which is sheltered, it'll be fine. Now, to keep the colour theme going of pale yellow and palish blues, I've got an echinops. This is a variety called platinum blue, and I love its foliage. But of course, echinops have these round, sort of cut metal heads of blue flowers, and bees love them too. This is Coreopsis. I love Coreopsis. This is a variety called moonbeam. I love the relationship between these rather delicate, ferny foliage and the flowers that look as though they're almost balancing on top, floating above. Absolutely lovely. And we're going to bring this forward a bit. And I've also got these. Now, this is evening primrose. It's a biennial and will open out in the evening, hence the name, and it's got wonderful fragrance. So let's get the rose in first. Dig your planting hole, like this. Right, just make sure you've got the height right. So keep it in the pot. That's not bad. It is important with roses not to plant them too high. Better to have them slightly low in the soil. Under normal circumstances, I would plant that as it is. But when it's really hot like this, I'm going to soak the hole before I plant it. Just fill it up and let it soak in. So while that is draining, I'm going to plant a few other things that are going to be less stressed. So things like the echinops. For that. Pop that in. And I'm ready to plant the rose too. All right, here we go. This is the moment of truth. There we go. Now you'll notice I haven't added any manure or compost or feed into the planting hole. And there's a good reason for that, because I want the roots to get out into the soil. If you're going to add any goodness, add it to the surface so it works slowly into the soil, because the sooner and the wider those roots spread out into the soil, the healthier the plant will be. While I'm planting up the rest of this, let's join Sue Kent, because she made a trip to Aberglasney Gardens in Carmarthenshire to get inspiration and advice for her own garden at home.
I'm always on the lookout for new things to plant in my allotment and in my borders at home, and for new methods of gardening too. And one of the best ways I find of doing this is by visiting other gardens. And luckily for me, I have the fabulous Aberglasney Gardens near me. Jam-packed with so many different types of habitat and unexpected ideas for my borders and veg plot, it never fails to ignite my garden creativity. Although everything here is on a really big scale, I'm hoping to find something here that I can use and scale down in my garden. The person to turn to for some top tips is head gardener Joseph Atkin. So Joseph, this is looking incredible.
Thank
How
you.
did you get it to look this good?
Well, we put a lot of work goes into it, and believe it or not, even though it's on a huge scale, we actually garden in that same way that a home gardener does, where you're short of space, you're short of labour, you don't want the reeds growing and all these sorts of things.
So what would you say the ethos is here?
Well, our aim with the whole of the kitchen garden is to get a really good vegetable crop, fruit crop, herb crop, but also flowers. Good examples of this, in the distance here, we've got the fennel, which is growing at the back. Looks lovely, amazing foliage, it grows all through the season. In front of that, we've got Tithonia torch, which is pretty much an ornamental. That's a nice big thug, and the two kind of cancel each other out.
I find it really interesting because I know that fennel's a thug in my garden, that by putting another thug next door, you keep it in check and you can keep the shape. That's a really good take-home for me.
In the foreground, we've got the giant marigold, which gives you all sorts of benefits from a pest and disease point of view. And then, to fill in all the gaps, we've got the pumpkins and squashes.
So your asparagus is looking tall and healthy and frondy. I've tried to grow them, they're not doing well at all. What am I doing wrong?
Well, there's a couple of tricks to asparagus. It needs a really sunny spot. It needs really good free draining soil. Doesn't want competition around it. And probably the biggest challenge with asparagus is patience. It'll probably be 7 years before you're really cropping. My advice would be in a home garden, find the sunniest spot on the corner of a border or something would probably be better than in the vegetable garden, and it should come well there.
So patience.
Patience,
is a
unfortunately.
virtue. Joseph, I love these low-growing apple trees. Are they what's known as stepovers?
Yes, we've actually made them a bit higher than a normal step over, which normal step overs are about that big, ours are about this big, and we affectionately call them trip overs, not step overs. And essentially, you plant what's called a one-year-old maiden, so it's 1 year after it's been grafted, a one-year-old tree, and you plant that, and then at whatever height, or just below the height that you want to take your line out of fruit, you chop it off, and then the two shoots that come out, just tie that onto a wire, and then you just tie the two shoots onto the wire, and they'll grow out steadily along it.
How do we look after them once they are established?
That's also very easy. The one thing you need to do is give it what's known as an annual prune. Shall I show you how to do it?
Yes, I'd love to see how to do
Brilliant.
it. I'll have a go too, if I may.
Okay, so the word that they use for it is you prune your apple trees back to 3 buds, which is essentially 3 leaves. So you count back 3 to 5 leaves from that pot,
Yeah.
and then you just put a cut on, nice clean cut on, and you're done. And what you've actually created is affectionately known as a fruiting spur, and it'll be on that spur that you'll get your growth for next year.
I think this is really good that we can grow apple trees at any height. And so it doesn't matter whether you've got a different type of reach or you've got a bad back, you can, make them happen at the height that suits you. If there's one thing I love to do when visiting other gardens, is to wander along the border of perennials and see what combinations jump out at me. I'm redesigning a sunny border at home, but it also is quite windy. And I'm looking for something that can cope with the wind. This fabulous Stipa gigantea could be an option. I've always been a bit reticent about grasses because I often see them looking floppy. But apparently this one will hold its own in the wind, which is marvellous. Here we've got this vibrant Hemerocallis. It's a lovely yellow. Although daylilies only flower for a day, as their name suggests, if you plant them en masse, you get a really good display like this. And it's a lovely yellow colour. I love bright colours, so this is really popping out at me. And then this is Ligularia, which I've not come across before. The Ligularia works well in full sun or partial shade, but it does like a moist, damp soil, so it might not be suitable for all types of garden. But if we look under the leaves, they're a beautiful purple colour, which is it's lush and shiny, and it's rather a lovely thing. If I stand back, you can see behind it those tall, long purple stems, Phyllictrum ellin. The plant combination here is amazing. I've got lots of ideas here to go away and think about. This is a blue lilac bonanza of flowers. This is Campanula lactiflora. They are hardy. They flower all the way through from June to September, and they are full of nectar and pollen for insects. In a way, I sort of like this collapsed look, and if you've got other plants around them, I think it's fine like this. So if you're a bit lazy, you don't necessarily need to stake them. I'm absolutely loving this salvia. It lasts for 4 months. It's a beautiful blue, and it's called Salvia nemorosa caradonna. It's got lovely tall spikes, it's compact, and behind me is another salvia called Dayglow. And it really is a wonderful contrast to this, because this is nice and spiky and that's nice and sort of little flowery. These lovely orange lilies topped with yellow are called Grand Cru, and they have got beautiful long stems which I think will be excellent to cut and bring into the house and put in a vase. All of these, if you haven't got a border, you can grow in pots. This is a real inspiration for me to get planning. Around every corner in this garden, there's something spectacular to see. And this has inspired me to make more adventurous plant choices as I move through the months ahead.
I would endorse what Sue said about every garden having the possibilities for inspiration, for advice, for direction. There is no garden, however big it is, however small, however different from your own, that you can't learn from. Now I'm watering in my planting, giving it a really good soak. And as a rule, we just water plants in and then leave them, never water them again. But if it's really hot, it's a good idea to water them regularly until you see signs of new growth. Now, we love seeing gardens from viewers all over the world, and we've had quite a few from America. Well, this time, America has come to us because we've been sent a film from an American couple who set up home in London and are celebrating their weeds.
Hi, I'm Steve.
I'm Dave.
And welcome to our garden in northwest London.
So we rent this flat, and we moved in about 7 years ago. And when we first moved in, there wasn't a whole lot here. We've added a lot of plants since then, and many of what we have growing now are things that grow naturally here. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was gardening with weeds. We have been leaving more and more weeds each year as we garden here. You know, when we first began, we would weed the flower beds and keep everything very manicured, but Monty always says not to keep things too tidy because it's better for the wildlife. So this year particularly, we've decided to just let the weeds grow. And some weeds we've even planted, like this big burdock that you see in this picture here. There's a teasel just beyond it. Both of those are things that some people would consider weeds, but we think the burdock is pretty amazing.
So I'm 6 feet tall, and you can see how tall these teasels are. One thing that we've noticed since we started allowing more weeds to grow is that bugs have really increased in number, and I think that's because we give them more cover to reproduce and survive.
Now, one thing about weeds is, of course, they will take over, and you do need to kind of control their spread. So we will deadhead the flowers, we'll take the seed heads off before they have a chance to spread around too much, and that sort of helps keep things under control. We want them to reseed a bit, but we don't want them to go crazy.
I hope you enjoyed visiting our weedy garden.
Cheers!
Well, I'm with Dave and Steve on liking a handsome weed, but I would give a word of warning about burdock. It's a magnificent plant until the seed heads appear, and then they entangle themselves in dog fur like nothing else. Now, this is Sarracenia, and these are carnivorous plants. I've had them in the greenhouse actually for about 5 years, eating up flies. However, they don't need to be in a greenhouse. And I think I've got a much better home for them. Because they look so exotic, with these extraordinary tubes in which they entice insects in and then digest them, we tend to think that they're tender. But these come from North America. They live in bogs, and they are pretty much fully hardy. Now, although they're so hardy, there are actually two conditions that you must have so that they thrive. The first is they need acidic growing conditions with very low nutrients. I grow mine, for example, in a mixture of leaf mould and bracken compost. And the second thing is they must never dry out. They have to sit in water. So the very shallow margins of this wildlife pond are perfect. You don't plant them in there, you just put them in the pots in the water. So this can just go there. This one can go next to it. That's fine. Yeah, they certainly add a bit of glamour to the wildlife pond. But behind me, I've got an area that is becoming increasingly dark and shady. Of all the plants that will thrive in dry shade, ferns top the list. And I've got two kinds of Dryopteris here. I've got Dryopteris felix mass. Now the fronds can be 3 foot tall, it can have the same spread. And this one is one of my favourite ferns of all. This is Dryopteris affinis cristata. Now what I plan to do is line this rough path that we have along here. And ferns like nice, open, loose soil. But having said that, Dryopteris in particular are very forgiving. And that can pop in there like that. Now, I suspect that most of us who garden try and get as much colour into our gardens as possible, but not everybody. And we went to Whitstable to visit the garden of Sylvie Bois-Ménard. And she applies her horticultural skills to encourage as much green foliage as possible.
When people walk past, they call it the jungle. Oh, you mean the jungle? Because no other garden in the road is like this one. My name is Sylvie. I am French. I came to this country about 50 years ago to learn English. I lived with my husband David. We created the garden together and we've been here for 13 years. I like foliage because I think it makes me feel calmer and more serene, and seeing green, it just makes you feel you are in the middle of nature. We have two different types of garden. The front garden is inspired by Mediterranean plants, and the back garden is more foliage garden with lots of evergreen and contrast of different colors of foliage, lime green, dark. I always wanted a front garden because I think it's quintessentially English. But this front garden is totally different because it's not a lawn. We had a lawn. So when I saw the lawn, I said, that will have to go. We'll have to find a way of making it interesting. I like foliage because without foliage, you just see the ground. The Corsican hellebore foliage will last after it's flowered. So the interest carries on all winter. So you always have something to look at. And under the tree, we have huge leaf plant, which is Trachestemon, and which would cover a huge area. Blue flowers, a bit like hyacinth, early in the season. And Persicaria, which is, adds a bit of height, which is nice, but has also a very nice leaf. When I moved to my new house with my husband in my 40s, I said to him, never, never take me to a garden centre. I used to actually be a bit annoyed with people who always talk about plants and gardening. And I thought, aren't they boring? I find it quite funny, really. And I think, why did I say that? Because when I first started gardening, it became a real obsession. And I couldn't wait to go to the garden centre. I couldn't wait to go to all the plant fairs. It's like a chrysalis becoming a butterfly. It's like you suddenly find a new dimension to your life. This is Sambucus nutcut variety. It's very, very rare. The foliage is wonderful, isn't it? Some people think it looks like an acer, but it's very fluffy. So I really like it. I use it a lot for flower arranging. I always wanted a Cotinus cogaria because this called in French it's called l'arbre à plumes, which means the feather tree. Because when the flowers come up, they really are like feathers. And I just love it because of the color. So the contrast of leaves is very important, and the contrast of texture is very important for me. I like to contrast very lime green with dark foliage. So if you're going to have lots of shady places, you concentrate on lime to throw a bit of light at the back of the borders. This area is the underplanting which we chose to echo the colour of the shrubs. This is Persicaria, and it picks up the colours of the Pittosporum and the lovely Persicaria gold. It contrasts with the dark, and it picks up the colour of the Philadelphus, which has now finished flowering. In this pot, we have Veratrum nigrum, which is a better foliage plant than a hosta because it doesn't get eaten by the slugs and the snails like hostas do. This leaf, as you can see, is pleated. In fact, I can just make it a little bit bigger like that. And the pleats are absolutely wonderful. So you can see that everything is covered. There's nothing, no earth showing, which is my purpose. It shows you don't need flowers to make a garden. You can make it with just textures, different color of leaf. The greenery, even in the rain, looks absolutely beautiful. They seem to glow. This is a thank you. But I always find place for one more plant. I'm a plantaholic, as they say.
I really like Sylvie's garden, and I love the word she used to describe the feeling it gave. It was of serenity. And green does that in a way that no other colour can. Now, these are the outdoor tomatoes. They're all Gardener's Delight. And Gardener's Delight is essentially a cherry tomato, quite a big cherry. They're cordons, so that they are growing up a support, and they want to be restricted to one stem with leaves and trusses. But what you will get are what are called side shoots, and there is a good example of one. So that is the main stem in a straight line, that's a leaf, and at an angle of 45 degrees between the two, you have that side shoot, and that needs taking out. And the reason you take them out is because they have very vigorous growth. They may even bear fruit, but they are putting more energy into growth than fruit bearing. So in the long run, they're depriving you of tomatoes. So at least once a week, just pinch out the side shoots. Right, still to come on today's programme. we have another chance to meet a beekeeper in Yorkshire with a passion to share her expertise.
Bees are having a tough time at the moment, so we need to teach our children the skills of beekeeping, and they're our next generation beekeepers.
And I'll be planting some late season colour in the cottage garden. But first, we're going to another viewer's garden, and it belongs to Emma Barry.
Hi, my name is Emma. This is Luna. We live in Derbyshire, and welcome to our garden. Over the years, we've introduced water to our garden in many different ways, from a washing up bowl, working up to bigger bowls. Then last year in lockdown, we decided to dig out our own pond. Some of our plants are out our own garden, this arum lily and a flag iris, and then other ones we bought from a local garden centre. Around the edges, what we did was we put wildflower seed, scattered it around, and this is what it's created in a year. We've seen lots of different wildlife. The birds come in here and they decide to have a bath. We got some frog spawn, and last year was the first year we've had dragonflies in our garden. Anyone who's got an animal that's gone into the vets has come out with one of these. Rather than put it in landfill, we decided to use it as a cloche. Here in Derbyshire, we have very cold and wet winters, and our arum lily never flowers. This is the first year it's flowered, so our homemade cloche, thanks to Luna, has worked. Hope you found those tips helpful. Thanks everybody for watching. Happy gardening from me and Luna.
Well, thanks for the tips, Emma. Although I think that any kind of collar that the vet put on Patty would be good as a cloche for perhaps, I don't know, one berry? Maybe it wouldn't work. However, what will work is if I harvest the elephant garlic. This is a job that I could have done actually any time in the last week. They are absolutely ready. And you know when garlic are ready for harvesting, when the leaves are more yellow than green. And basically that means that the bulb under the ground is not going to increase in size anymore. So it needs lifting and drying. You need to get a fork and go down gently and get right underneath it and lever it out the ground. But this is the important bit, the roots. You want to take the roots with you because they are attached to the bulb by a plate, and you don't want to damage that plate because if you do, it makes storage much more tricky. And in this weather, the easiest place to dry them is simply on the ground. Just dig them up and lay them on the surface of the soil. If it gets wet, if it's more than a shower or so, they will have to go indoors. I often lay them out in the greenhouse, or you could make a rack, anything where there's good airflow and they've got sun. And the beauty of elephant garlic is that it's mild and has good flavour. I'm happy with that. That's a good crop and then no trouble. I've got a bed of two types of lettuce. We've got the green cos lettuce, little gem, and then the ready tinged loose leaf lettuce, which is called New Red Fire. But the cos has bolted, and that's happened in the last 48 hours. Now, bolting, which we often refer to, simply means that the plant has stopped putting energy into producing foliage and is putting all its energy into producing flowers and therefore seeds. And if I pull this one up here, cos lettuce should have sort of oval heart shape to it, where the leaves are tightly packed to form a crisp centre, but it's a cool weather crop. And once it gets hot, it will develop a strong stem. And if I pick the leaves off this, you can see that the stem is very elongated, it'll soon produce a flower, that will have seed. That's the end of it as eating, because as soon as that stem starts to grow, the leaves get bitter. Now this is the reason why I'm not planting lettuce in this bed, which had broad beans in it, and that leaves nitrogen in the soil, so it's ideal for a leafy crop, so I'm planting parsley. And now is a good time to either plant or sow parsley. And if you sow some now, it'll be ready to plant out in September, and that will last you all winter. It's very hardy. And to get the best of parsley, it's important to let them become decent-sized plants. Each seedling needs to have room, at least 6 inches apart. And the great virtue for the gardener is that whilst they develop a good root system and get a nice big plant, that means you get many more leaves. And also, because the root system's strong, you can cut it right to the ground and they will regrow better. We've got a chance now to see a film that Nick made in 2019, pre-COVID, when he went to Scotland to discover more about a disease that is increasingly causing havoc to woody plants in our parks and gardens.
Imagine our gardens without trees, without ornamental plants. It's a troubling thought. Trees and plants make up the fabric of our landscape, but they're under attack, and the culprit can't even be seen with the naked eye. This is Phytophthora, microscopic organisms that cause devastation to a huge variety of plants and trees. This group of algae-like pathogens spread easily over many miles. The tiny spores can travel in mist, infected soil, or even a splash of rain. Dr. Alexandra Schlenzig is a horticultural pathologist with a PhD in Phytophthora. She's one of the UK's leading experts on this garden disease. Alexandra, how many forms of Phytophthora are there?
There are about 170 different species of Phytophthora, and they are distributed all over the world. So usually in their native environment, they don't necessarily cause much disease. It's just when they are moved into a different country and the plants there in this country are not used to this Phytophthora, they don't have developed any defense against it. That's when they cause these massive diseases we see.
Which of the Phytophthora is most problematic in the UK at the moment?
Well, at the moment I would say it's Phytophthora ramorum, simply because it has such a wide host range. It affects so many different areas like forestry, horticulture, the natural environment.
Phytophthora ramorum is the garden and landscape enemy #1. The first UK finding was made on a viburnum plant at a Sussex garden centre in 2002. Are there garden species that tend to be more susceptible, more affected by the disease?
Yeah, popular garden plants to be infected are rhododendron, pieris, magnolia, camellias, witch hazel. The species list is endless, so you get about 120 different species that can be affected by the disease.
That's bad news. And so, I guess the big question is there a cure?
No, in the garden there is really not much you can do about it. As soon as you notice it, you should remove the plant. If you can't burn it in your garden, if you can't put it in the bin, don't put it onto your compost heap, because you would spread the disease all over the garden when you use the compost, because it doesn't reach the temperatures that are necessary to kill the spores.
It was first spotted in America, where it became known as sudden oak death, because of the impact it had on American oaks. While our native oaks are more resistant to the disease, it has now spread from broadleaf species to conifers, like Japanese larch. And since it was discovered here in 2002, it's been found right across the UK. Here at Arduni Garden near Oban, they've been hit hard by the ramorum disease. In 2007, they discovered it had infected a huge swathe of their woodland and had to take drastic action.
Wow, that's pretty devastating, isn't it? Simon Jones is from the National Trust for Scotland. He knows exactly what to look out for when this disease strikes. So what are the first and most typical signs of remorum when it occurs?
Especially in large trees, which is the issue that we've got just now, is you tend to see a yellowing in the foliage is the first indication, and then more closely you'll see needles droop. As that advances, you begin to see lesions on the side of the stems.
By law, an infected plant has to be removed, along with those sitting within 100 metres radius of it. The result of this outbreak means that nearly 1,000 larch trees will be felled and cleared, and the garden's prize rhododendron collection is in grave danger.
Simon and his team plan to turn this tragic loss into something positive. And in the pipeline is a new arboretum.
So we've inherited a situation in which we have about 900 Japanese larch. That's too many of one species of plant in the garden for the woodland. So the new arboretum will be generated and created in a way that builds resilience and diversity into it. So some of the plants we'll use for that are just our native plants, things like rowan, like hazel, especially Atlantic hazel, black pine, Scots pine, and by choosing those plants, we build in resilience into the garden.
Simon and his team have got exactly the right idea in the battle against the Phytophthora. You can't cure it, but you can choose plants that are less susceptible and even resilient against it. The remorum form of Phytophthora is a notifiable disease, so if you spot it on trees and shrubs in your garden or in public places, then you need to let the authorities know. And you can find out how to do that on our website. But before you do, here are a few hints and tips on spotting this potentially devastating disease.
Phytophthora remorum affects mainly forest species and some large garden shrubs, like rhododendrons and camellias. It's different to the Phytophthora that causes blight in potatoes, tomatoes, and root rot in other plants. These types of infections can be devastating, but they're not notifiable. Unfortunately, it can be hard to identify, but one of the telltale signs is the appearance of brown lesions along the main vein of a leaf in the shape of a V. If you suspect you've got remorum in your garden, don't try and control it yourself. Report it straight away.
Over the last year, I've been very involved with international plant health, and I do know that the problem of diseases spreading through movement internationally is becoming much worse and is very serious. But it's worth just being considered and not panicking about it. We learned that there are lots of different types of Phytophthora, for example, and not all of them are going to necessarily affect your garden. And all of us are going to have to deal with potato and tomato blight, which is a Phytophthora, and that won't spread to your tree. So yes, watch out for it, but inform yourself and just keep a balanced view. Now, this is Acanthus mollis, and it's a much maligned plant because we're always told don't plant it in your borders, it's a thug, it will take over, and that's true. But I want to fly a flag for Acanthus because if you've got the right place for it, which basically means somewhere where it can be contained, the base of a wall, next to a tarmac drive, it can't come out this way, it can't go back that way, and it just looks fabulous because these extraordinary flowers can take any amount of heat, they stand tall, they're very dramatic, and if you've got the spot, there is hardly any plant you can grow in the garden that is simply more gloriously dramatic. Now, for our last visit this week to one of your gardens, we're going up to Cockermouth in Cumbria.
Hello Gardeners World, my name's Angela Johnson and I'm going to show you around my garden, which has really saved me because 6.5 years ago I actually had a double stroke, and the first one took my arm and leg, and the second one has taken my eyesight, which unfortunately hasn't come back. The sight I have is very much like looking through a keyhole, and in a distance you're just a shadow. So I like bright colours because I can pick out that little tiny scrap of colour, such as this orange here. It's absolutely gorgeous on the rose, and the reds, the pinks, yellow as well. The most important thing, they must have a good smell, because I love smell all around the garden. Just in behind me is the Gertrude Jekyll rose, and the smell is absolutely amazing. And mixed with the honeysuckle in behind, the combination of the two at the minute is absolutely wonderful. One of the issues I do have is cutting the edge of the grass, and I found a way around it with a simple pair of kitchen scissors, and it works for me. So I know it is a tedious way, but we get there. It's just a case of feeling and not chopping my fingers off. And we also have a lot of people that walk past our wall, because we have a pub at the village here down the road, and everybody stops and has a chat. It's been lovely meeting people, especially the way COVID's been. Hope you've enjoyed the garden. Thank you.
I think your garden looked terrific, Angela, and thank you very much for sharing it with us. These are Verbena bonariensis seedlings. They self-seeded in the Paradise Garden, and I dug them up when they were very small. So I'm going to distribute the Verbena throughout the rose beds. Now, the beauty of Verbena bonariensis is it grows tall, so it will rise up through the roses, and you don't need a great mass of them to get the effect. You can see the roots of these have come through the bottom of the plugs, which probably means I should have planted them out a bit earlier, but I didn't want to disturb the roses. And there's always this in any garden. There's no perfect time to do anything. All you can do is try and get it as good as possible. So we've now got the space, we've got the plants, they're a little bit overgrown, but they'll be all right. Now, I've moved these seedlings, and that's a very efficient way of recycling plants you've already got. I've often grown it from seed, tend to sow it in March, and then plant it out round about now, and that gives us our late summer display. You can take cuttings. Cuttings anytime now through to the end of September, and then you overwinter the cuttings, particularly if you live in a very cold area, and that guarantees you supply. You could try sowing seed now. I've never done that, but there's no reason why not. Sow the seed now, they will germinate, keep the seedlings protected over winter, plant them out next spring for a really good display next summer. But however you grow them, I think every garden looks better with Verbena bonariensis. They are also really good for pollinators. Bees love them. And we've now got another chance to visit a beekeeper in Huddersfield in Yorkshire, whose passion for bees is not just for looking after them and caring for them, but also sharing their virtues with local school children.
Morning, ladies. How are we doing today? Looking lovely. My name is Yvonne Kilvington, and I work here at Ashbow School, but out of school, I'm the Yorkshire Bee Lady. I'm responsible for maintaining the vegetable beds, the gardens, looking after the bees, the hens and the duck, not forgetting Donald, with the children's help as well, and bringing the children out into this fantastic environment. I've had a love of bees since I was a little girl. I'd run after bees, butterflies. That was my childhood, and coming here, that's what I wanted the children to experience as well. When I first came here, it was builder's rubble, it was burnt out cars, shopping trolleys, so we got the JCBs in and they cleared the area. I had a vision what I wanted it to look like. Borders, wildflowers, nicely mown grass in areas, but a lot left wild. So you can see here we've got red campion, we've got aqualegias, we've got lots of perennials, and most of the perennials are really good for bees. So we've got this lovely borage here, which is one of my favourites. Slightly prickly feel to it, but they've got these fantastic blue star flowers, which are loved by bees. And they're great to liven up a salad as well, because they are edible and they've got a cucumbery taste to them. And then just poking through here is one of my favourite flowers, Nigella, Love in a Mist, which looks so pretty, just poking through the fennel. These are great plants for putting in your borders, mixing around in your veg beds, and they're great for our pollinators. Bees are having a tough time at the moment. So we need to teach our children the skills of beekeeping because it's an ancient craft and they're our next generation beekeepers. So we set Bee Club up about 7 years ago. We currently have 10 beehives in our apiary. Our children get dressed up in their bee suits. Inevitably they turn into spacemen. Where have the bees gone?
Did they fly out?
They've gone down in between these gaps, down into the hive a little bit deeper.
Is there a king bee?
There isn't a king bee, Zubair. There are lots of drones, and the queen has lots of boyfriends. We've had all the great queens here. We've had Bee Elizabeth I, Bee Elizabeth II, Queen Beyonce. So these names do stick. They send out their oldest members to do the hardest job, and that would be the equivalent of us sending all our pensioners out to go dig up the motorway. It is quite ruthless in there, so, but that's bees for you. The children's attitude and view towards looking after our pollinators has really increased. They know the importance of bees play in our survival, so they have a good understanding of the importance of looking after nature.
A famous person said that if bees went, humans wouldn't be able to live because bees pollinate a lot of our things.
So I'd say we've got a win-win situation here. We've got a win situation for the school in that we're growing our own vegetables, a win situation for the bees because we're providing vital forage for them, and it's teaching the kids about the importance of the role that they play. Doesn't get any better than that, does it? It's about planting from one side of the year right through to the other. So starting January, February, you're thinking about snowdrops, crocus, those early spring bulbs that provide a rich source of pollen. Right through to the end of the year, looking at things like ivy, allowing your ivy to flower because the flowers are really pretty. They're like little fireworks, and the bees will be all over that at the end of the year because that's the last forage that they're likely to get. Our honey tastes very sweet, so there's a mixture of all the summer and the spring that you find around here. So it's sunshine in a jar, really. There's days when I finished work and I often stand at the gate and just gaze up and down this area and I think, did we do this? It's a place to come and contemplate. They make me feel happy. And that's hard to describe because unless you put your hand on a beehive and you hear their hum and you can smell the smells of the honey, see the queen, see the brood, you can never feel what a beekeeper feels. You've got this overwhelming desire to protect her.
I can't begin to match Yvonne's knowledge passion or skill when it comes to bees, but I can share her love of them. In fact, the garden is full of them. You can see this agastache has always got bees of some sort on it, not just honeybees, but bumblebees and solitary bees. And there are times when I walk through the garden and it just seems to be buzzing and thrumming with the activity of tens of thousands of bees. And this weekend, Radio 2 has their Big Bee Challenge. The idea is you take part, you contribute to it. You could plant to encourage bees, you could build a bee hotel for the winter, you could even go on a bee safari. And if you want to know about that or anything else connected with Radio 2's Big Bee Weekend, you can go to our website. Now, apart from looking after your bees, which of course you all must do, here are some jobs for this weekend. If you're growing squashes and pumpkins, and like me, you're training them up some kind of vertical support, it's important to keep tying them in. Not least because any lateral growth touching the soil will put down roots. And be sure to tie them really securely, because by autumn, they're going to be heavy. At this time of year, especially when it's hot and dry, sweet peas are rapidly going to seed, and the best way to stop that is to keep picking. And if you're going away on holiday, it's doubly important. So before you leave, pick every single flower and give them away. And if you're going to be away for more than a week, ask somebody to come in so they can pick the flowers and enjoy them. And this will mean that when you return from your holiday, you'll have plenty more flowers to come. One of the reasons that we grow vegetables in rows is because that makes them easier to hoe, and hoeing is the best way to keep on top of weeds in the veg garden. Use a sharp hoe. I sharpen mine with a whetstone or a file, and then just slide it along under the surface of the soil, cutting off the weeds at their roots. Do it on a dry day, so the weeds will then wither on the surface and they can be gathered up and taken to the compost heap. I do admit that over the years I have been guilty of not sitting enough in the garden. I'm sure lots of other gardeners know the feeling. You stop for a minute, you have a cup of tea, and then you see something that needs doing, and before you know what's happened, 45 minutes have gone by, your tea is cold, and you haven't stopped. But earlier this year, we got this pair of garden benches, very second-hand. But we do sit here a bit more now, and perhaps I am learning after all these years. Just stop for a moment. Stop trying to control the garden and make it into something else, but just let it be and just enjoy those moments. However, there's no time for letting be or being busy or anything anymore, because that's it for today. We've run out of time. But I will see you back here at Longmeadow at 8 o'clock next Friday. So until then, bye-bye.